Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures, daily dose of nature. Today's topic, wildlife hide and seek, presented by NatHab expedition leaders Payal, Mehta, and Arpita Dutta. I'm your host, Rob Mess. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Over to you, Arpita.
Thank you so much, Rob, and thank you everyone for tuning today. And it's as usual, it's always lovely to present to all of you, and whatever we learn, we share. So, taking that in mind, how do you feel today, Payal?
I
Or
feel
everyone,
great.
please let us know in the chat.
I feel great, Arpita. Thank you.
Yeah. Next slide. So the thing is, today, if I have to say that how I am feeling is mostly, the brighter color like orange, yellow, green. You just see it. So because of happy and jolly go type, so I feeling like that. Imagine if the coat of our body or the dress we wear can just switch from like red to orange to yellow to green, depending on how our mood is today. How wonderful that would be. And the same thing happened when we talk about animals, that animals change color and they are in various colors and shades. I think the amount of shades we get to see in nature is incredible. And when we talk about animal changing color, the first thing we can imagine is the camouflaging. They are so well camouflaged that even when we go out for safaris, if the tiger is there beside, it's very difficult to find because they are so blend with all the woods and the grass, right? So it's a cryptic coloration pattern animals do have, for the defense mechanism or the tactic they follow to disguise their appearance, in front of their predator, or they for the prey they want to hide. And to blend with the surroundings, they have like it's like a masking for their location, to hide their identity or their movement. And today we are going to talk about that the organism that change color for several factors, which has so much of physical characteristic to it. And with the background and the disruptive coloration, we will get to know why, how, and maybe that why, how would lead us to many, many more questions. But initially, the animals do change for like colors in a way, or like seasonal changes and momentary changes. Pyle, why don't you talk about the seasonal changes? They change, change their colors.
Absolutely, Arpita. Yes, it's so true that there are so many colors in nature, and even more fascinating is when the same species changes color for various reasons, right, through its lifetime. And like you said, there is one that is seasonal changes. These are changes, everyone, that we see happening over a longer period of time and probably repeatedly over seasons, right? So the photograph in front of you, many of you might be familiar with most of these animals, from the foxes to the rabbits to the weasels, because these are found in more extreme latitudes, in the colder regions, where you see these colors change seasonally, especially from summer to winter. These are usually gradual changes, and like Arpita was saying, one of the main reasons for change in color in nature is to be able to hide, right? So what better than having a perfect white for a snowy winter, right? It's great to hide from predators, and it's great for predators to be so well hidden that they can hunt more efficiently. So, but this is just one of the reason and one of the ways in which we can explain seasonal changes. There are many more different reasons and ways. For example, in birds, where they change colors every time they come into their breeding cycle. We call it the breeding plumage. Or in butterflies, where they have a wet season morph and a dry season morph for 2 different times of the year when it's wet and dry. So yeah, that's about seasonal changes. And the other kind that we have, which Arpita will tell us about, is momentary changes.
Yes, Pai. It's like switching your mood suddenly. You are planning for a vacation and you have some work and your mood changes. So it is like that. It happens quickly or more quickly. So in the case of momentary changes, there are different ways. Why do the change? Like for a seasonal factor, what you have explained, Payal, that it's sustained for a longer period of time because they need to hide for a long period of time. They need to camouflage. But in case of a momentary change, they have to depend. Next slide. They have to depend like from the hide from the prey, for an instance, to attract the mate during the breeding time and to absorb more heat or reflect heat. That time also they do change color. And of course, the temperature and the environment where they are living in. So as long as these changes are happening in the environment, or how rapidly these changes are happening, according to that, the animals respond through the skin, like just the color of their skin. How interesting that is. And of course, when the momentary changes come, I think the first camouflage and colorful things comes to our mind is something you are going to talk about, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm sure most of our viewers by now have even guessed what is the first animal that comes to mind when we speak of quick changes in color. Of course, it's the chameleon, right? There are phrases about it, they are mentioned in literature, and people who change their stance are called stop being like a chameleon, right? It's such a familiar creature in just languages because this characteristic is so famous, right? Where its ability to change colors. However, most people used to think two things about chameleons. And if you look at phrases or if you look at popular knowledge, two things are: one, that chameleons change color mainly to be able to camouflage. I think there was even a Disney character, I forget its name, which it's like whichever surface it would go on, it could become that. So chameleon, the cartoon chameleon, if it went on a chessboard, it would become black and white, right? So that's one popular thing where you think that chameleons can take up any color that their background is. They're so good at camouflaging. And the second is what most scientists thought, actually until much recently, that chameleons change color by sort of shifting color pigments around in their body, right? But of course, thanks to all the learning that we are doing due to these webinars, we have learned many more things, many different things about the chameleon. For the study of the chameleon, scientists took the example of this chameleon, which is the panther chameleon, which is a native of Madagascar. This chameleon, when at rest, is an almost green color animal with few shades of maybe blues and browns scattered here and there. However, when this chameleon is in an excited or a stressed condition, it changes its color drastically, right? From a greenish, overall greenish color animal, it can become an overall almost reddish orange or a bright yellow, vibrant animal. Now, this was fascinating, right? And what better chameleon to study change of colors in? When the skin of this chameleon was put under an electron microscope, they found that yes, sure, it does have some pigments in it, but the pigments may not be the primary reason for a quick change in colors. So this shift in colors could happen between almost 30 seconds to 1.5 minutes, right? It can be really quick. And if not pigments of color, what could it be? Can you believe that the real reason was micro tiny crystals inside cells of its skin? And these crystals are tiny transparent crystals made of a protein, right? And these crystals that are inside these cells are in different shapes, different sizes, and differently oriented, differently arranged. These cells that have these crystals are called iridophores, right? We are very familiar with it actually. We may or may not have realized it. These crystals are there in many different colorful things in nature. Butterflies, peacock feathers, and even the hummingbird. And these are just a few of many other examples. So these iridophores, these tiny crystals, are within the cells of these tiny hair inside these feathers or inside the scales of, say, butterfly wings, right? The way they arrange, the way they orient themselves gives it what we call iridescence in nature. Now, coming back to the panther chameleon, it turned out that it was not just pigment cells, but also these iridophores that gave rise to the colors. So if you look at the chameleon skin, it has many different layers. The first layer is the regular topmost skin layer. Just underneath that, you have a layer that has the pigment cells, the chromatophores, which have the colors reds, yellows, in that range, orange and the others. But under that, you have what is represented here in the blue. You have the iridophores, which have those tiny transparent crystals. And underneath that, you have the melanophores, which have melanin, the same color as our skin, the pigment that gives us the skin color, right? Now, when light falls on the skin of the chameleon, if the chameleon is relaxed, these iridophores are tightly packed. When they are tightly packed, they are mainly reflecting the blue color. When the blue color is getting reflected out of the skin, it is going through the yellowish range of the pigment cells, giving it the green color. When the chameleon is excited or it's agitated, it expands its skin. The sheer expansion of its skin and these small crystals changing its orientation makes these crystals now reflect the bright colors in the range of the reds and the oranges and the yellow, giving it a vibrant color, a totally different color. So here, like Arpita was saying, she was in a great mood this morning and she was this afternoon and she's feeling a very red and orange. Similarly, the chameleon, when it is excited, whether it sees a mate or it sees a rival male or any of those emotions, it is able to change its color just by the expansion of its skin and the changing of orientation of these tiny crystals in the iridophores. It's fascinating. Some chameleons, they've also seen 2 layers of iridophores and not just one. So one, of course, is giving it the colors, but a second layer that is underneath the first one also helps in thermoregulation. So if it is too hot outside, the lower layer helps to reflect UV rays. And if it is very cold outside, it helps to trap more and more light and heat inside it to warm up the animal. Isn't it so amazing? So over here, the iridophores are changing not just in response to the mood of the animal, but also in response to the temperature outside. It's just fascinating. And then if you look at the female of the chameleon, you'll see that she's rather dull looking, right? And one would have thought that it's because she doesn't have the color pigments. But you'll be surprised to know that it is a very little difference between the color pigment layer of the male and the female. What she doesn't have is as rich a concentration of the iodophores layer, the layer that is reflecting light through the crystals. Because of the lack of that, you see that young ones and females are much, much duller in color and have a lesser range of color change as compared to the vibrant males. Such an amazing thing and so complex when you actually look at it, isn't it? In India, we have just one species of chameleon. It is this beautiful green, rather small compared to the large panther chameleon of Madagascar. It doesn't have as big a range, but it still shows, as you can see on the screen here, quite an interesting range of color changes. For the longest time, we thought this was all to do with camouflage, but now we know camouflage might have a small role to play, but it's so much more to do with moods and the temperature. I think I'm going to look at chameleons completely differently, and I'm going to probably be guessing its mood every time I see one now. Don't you think so?
Absolutely. Hey, buddy, I'm angry today. Don't come near me. And then, so this is how it goes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the beauty of, natural history. And I think the most important is the observation, because even when we go into a lab to see some molecular changes and all, maybe this looks very similar. Okay, and recently I'm talking about just last month, a new species of turtle has been discovered a distribution discovered from Mizoram. So for which even I went. So that it looks exactly the same. I mean, if there is not much morphological differences you get to see. But when you do the molecular part, then you got to see it. So, I think that observation part, that something is different, something is coming out, nature is telling something, and your question starts aggregating like the pigments. Okay, that okay, what are the answers is when we talk about changing colors and stuff, I think there is another creature, the whole bunch in the marine life, which is difficult to beat by any other creature on land who are changing colors. Those are the cephalopods. I think cephalopods are exclusive group of creatures in the animal kingdom who can change color based on their activity and surrounding, and also their mood. So I think it's vast, and of course the ocean itself is vast. So their promptness to change in color is also very exclusive and fascinating. So how do they do that? So if you see this left hand side picture, chromatophore is one of the main thing which carries the vessel filled with pigments, and those pigments are divided into like different types, like the melanophore, which is more for the brown and black, and then you have the erythrophores, which is red in the reddish part, and the xanthophore, which is yellow. And these two combine together, this erythrophore and xanthophore, to create that orangish tinge, that is the carotenoid pigment. And then they also have these leucophores or iridophores. And you say that these two are the structural cell. These are not the pigments, but they take a huge role. Like, because sometimes we see the transparency in their skin. That actually happens due to this presence of these two structural cells. And also, they actually reflect this whitish and bluish tinge of color, what we see in animals. So, going to other cephalopods, I think the most incredible one, which can be out from, this is how, next slide. This is how the pigments get scattered in the skin with the pigment. But when we talk about the cephalopods, I think somebody mastered everything, and not only by the color, by all means. It has superpowers, high intelligence, flexibility. I mean, octopus could have done the best yoga in the world. What do you say, Pai? Any movement, any bend, could have been so easy for the octopus. So that's why it could be the rock star of the cephalopod world. And how could they do so? So if you go that, so octopuses, octopus have some specialized, or all the cephalopods mostly, high specialized chromatic elements in their skin, which is the chromatophore, which contains all the pigments, the iridophore and the leucophore, this we know. But it goes in two different ways. Process, which is the spectral mean the spectrum of light, the wavelength, how it works, and the spatial location, exactly which environment and how they are living in that environment. It depends on that. And also in this chromatophore, in their skin, they have like a sac in the chromatophore, which is elastic. Okay, that's why it's called cytoelastic, like a sac, which contains all those pigments, which red, yellow, brown, black, all these things. Okay, now to say it in a clear way, Payal, have you celebrated birthday with balloon? Nowadays we don't do because of the biodegradable kind of a thing. But when we were very young, I think at least we have celebrated our birthdays with balloons, right? So imagine,
Yes.
inflate a balloon little, like put little air into it. It will be little bigger, right? And spray some color on it, different colors. And then again inflate it with little more air and make it bigger. So imagine those dotted color portion, they will also scatter, they will also spread, and the color would look big, right, than the smaller one. So exactly how the skin of this octopus work. So what happens, this chromatophore cell is attached to a nerve. Here, each and every chromatophore, imagine the chromatophore has pigment vessels, and those each and every tiny chromatophores are attached to the nerves, which control the expansion and the contraction of the cell. Like how much wind they want to blow, or how much wind to take out to show the balloon bigger or a smaller with those pigments on it. And then it goes, and then the brain order the nerve or the chromatophore, hey, change the color. I'm in the rocky surface right now. So this is how it happens. Like all become the sac when the sac become wider, and the reverse pull, which means the contraction happen, and the less pigments are visible. This is how this whole color changing thing happens. Next slide. And with that, though they live in the ocean, but of course they go up and down in different layers of the ocean, right? Depth, not layer. I said depth. So even the octopus skin or the cephalopod skin work in the intensity of light. Light activate the chromatophore expansion. So if there is less light, you see the chromatophore things are relaxed, like they are not tightly bound. Just like we have learned about the gas solid and liquid molecules, right? It's aggravate this, these pigments, and they become lighter in shade. But when there is more light, they can reflect more color, because that's when you heat up the liquid, the molecules keep on moving, and in a contracted way, exactly these pigments work synchronizingly inside that sac to reflect that color outside, what we see. And now, Pai, when we talk about what we see, that means our vision. So in eye, there is a protein called opsin. And you know what, Payal? For an octopus, they really don't need to see where they are, because their skin contains, under their skin, these pigments areas contain this opsin protein. Maybe not that accurate what we see through our eye, but their skin can feel that. Their skin can realize that exactly which shade or which environment or the surrounding they are moving through. And accordingly, they change the color, not by the contrast or or the age of the area, but the brightness around them. They change the color accordingly. Can you change next slide? Yes, and here you have seen, and you can see that how the wavelength, the different wavelength and the color, what we have, this blue, green, yellow, red, and the black, brown, and yellow, how these wavelength works with the intensity, with the pigments in the chromatophores, and how we see the flashing colors. Not only that, their brain is so active that before we could even blink our eye, the octopus can change its color. How funny that is, and how fascinating that is. And while reading it, I got if you have heard about this mimic octopus, they can actually change the shape of their body as well, according to the place they are into. If they're near the coral, they will take the shape, they will almost look like the shape of the coral with the color the coral is having right behind them. I mean, this is incredible. I swear, Payal, I'm just feeling like to take a deep dive into the ocean and see these incredible creatures, and just awestruck. Like it's been amazing. What do you say, Payal?
Absolutely. I think it is so fascinating. I mean, the octopus itself is just like you said, at every level, a mind-blowing creature. And it has proved its intelligence in various experiments and observations, but even just its ability, just like you said, of course, the change in color, the number of various shades of colors that it can produce, and also teaming that up with being able to take the shape of the background that it is with is just incredible. Also, just by thinking of just the two examples that we had, it is so interesting that both are changing color, but one, yours, is changing color by ballooning, inflating in or deflating like a balloon, the number of pigments it has, right, the chromatophores. And in the previous example, we saw how, again, vibrant range of colors, of course, not the great range that an octopus has for sure, but still a different range, and totally mainly dependent on the changing the orientation slightly of the crystals, right, just with the expansion and the contraction of skin. It is just fascinating, just the different methods to achieve similar results, right? Anyway, with that, I think we can now, Arpita, I'm going to take you out of the sea. I know you want to go in for a deep dive, but I'm going to take you out and bring you back onto land. And this time with a little hand lens in your hand, because we are going to look at something very, very tiny. What we have here in front of us is what we call a tortoise beetle or a tortoise shell beetle. And these tiny insects must be not more than maybe 8 millimeters or maybe at best a centimeter large, right? And they are showing some very interesting reasons and ways in which they change color, right? So let's have a quick look. What we have here is a tortoiseshell beetle from northeast of India. Look at the beautiful shape. Look at this creature. Look how lovely it is. It has this wonderful golden metallic sheen, and it has a shell around its body which extends beyond its actual body, right? This is what actually gives it its name, the tortoise shell beetle, right? Because of this carapace-like thing on top of its body. This creature is able to change its color at will. Okay, it is not depending only on external temperature or automatically with its mood. It can change it on demand, right? Something like the octopus, but with a very, very different way. We'll look into it. But this one can change from a metallic golden to quite a red, right? And this was another fascinating thing for scientists, and they looked into it, and to study it, they found a similar beetle actually from America, from North America, which is called the Panama golden tortoise beetle. And this is what it looks like, right? It is a very similar golden color with almost a mirror-like finish, right? So if you look at it from far away, it may look like a little dewdrop on a leaf, right? If you go closer, it is such a perfect sheen that you could see reflection out of it, even though very, very tiny. This beetle can change colors like you can see over here. From the golden that it can gradually change to a red, again, within a few seconds to a few minutes sometimes, but usually a few seconds. And the way it does it is again totally different. So when they looked at the shell under an electron microscope, they saw that it had many, many layers within it, in that what looks like a transparent shell. And that shell, the layers have further divided into many, many, many layers, like you can see the picture over here at the bottom. Under those layers, there is one film of a red pigment. Okay, that's the only pigment that there is. Now, when this beetle is active and relaxed, it is this beautiful mirror-like metallic finish. And that time, even though there is a red pigment right underneath this transparent layer, you can't see the red at all. When they examined this beetle, they saw that these layers on top, the transparent layers, have little tiny micro grooves in them. Okay, it's porous. There are these little grooves in them. When the beetle is relaxed, these grooves are filled with the beetle's body fluid. When that happens, it makes that entire layer very smooth. And it is this excellent smooth finish which gives it its metallic mirror-like property, right? When the beetle is excited or stressed, right, at the time of copulation or when it is trying to evade a predator, that fluid seems to withdraw from those grooves, making those layers a little bit rough in a very micro scale, but it's now no more mirror smooth. Just by removing the fluid from those grooves and removing that mirror-like effect, the mirror changes into a window. So then this layer becomes almost translucent, giving you a peek into the red layer that's underneath, right? So again, a change in color, but this time totally dependent on the presence or the absence of fluid. Why do these beetles do it? They are still just theories. We are not quite sure. It is possible that some beetles become totally red. That could be because, especially in the insect world and even some other creatures, the color red or orange denotes it is a signal for being toxic or impalatable. So that could be one reason. The second reason, as seen in some beetles, like you can see here in the photograph, they also mimic other beetles. This one here, again a photograph from India, is mimicking a ladybug beetle, right? That just could be because in that area where it lives, there are many more ladybug beetles. So it is sort of becoming one of them and reducing its chance of being picked up, right? Because there's so many more over there, and birds cannot distinguish a tortoiseshell from a ladybug, especially if a tortoiseshell is going to look like this. And basically, it is just creating more safety for itself. These are all just theories, but just an extremely fascinating, I thought, way of changing color in nature. Don't you think, Arpita?
Oh, of course. Yeah, when you say that red means a signal, that is, I'm impalatable or danger, I think their verse is there that black and yellow, red and black venom lack. Red and
Hmm.
yellow kills the fellow. Have you heard this? It actually made up due to a coral snake, which mimicked the venomous one and a normal. So yeah, that's how I think we all know that the raid is danger. Okay. Yeah. So again, this mood swing things come in, and the next slide, which will come again, I will take you to the trees. You got me on the land and leaves. I'll take you to the trees because mostly we will talk about the Anura group, and in Anura group, there are frog and toads, but today we will focus on the frogs because I think the frogs have also uh, like a different hues they have in their skin, and of course they have a lot of varieties where they are living in, depending on the environment. And frogs do have there's they have, I mean, all the animals, they do have this color pigments in them, right? So the skin color change rapidly because of change in the relative state of pigment dispersion and aggregation, which we have been like talking about. And within this pigment cell, every, I think all the game is about this pigments and the intensity, wavelength, everything. I think it has a very statistical and a very mathematical calculation which we know, but I don't know how they follow that. I mean, do they know about calculus and everything? I mean, this is strange for the animals. And what happens, this is the same frog. Imagine this frog is also found in India, this lateralis. It's beautiful green in color and brown in color, and now we will see why. So if you go to the next slide, we can see that the vocal sac is inflated and the water is around. So it's in the monsoon. And this bullfrog has changed from dull brown color to brightly yellow colored. And most of us, we know that in monsoon, they change color, they become brighter, to attract the mate. And not only with the color, I think they with the high volume, they keep on croaking, to call their mate. But this happen with two things. I mean, more than that, frogs actually shows color in different areas, and that happened by two ways. One is physiological, which happens from days to months, and the next is your morphological, which from milliseconds to hours. Okay, and how and why this is happening. So imagine when we see a frog, if you go to the next slide. Yeah, so there are two ways they respond. One is biotic, which has this avoiding the predator, That's how they camouflage. The water balance. The frogs needs to be hydrated all the time. So depending on that, and the thermoregulation, to uh, absorb the heat and to release the heat from their body, and the abiotic, which means the temperature, light intensity, and the background. With all this thing, Payal, if we most of the time in the western Ghat of India, when the western side we move around, or wherever we see a tree frog, it mostly the brownish in color. But in some areas, we also get to see the same species, not maybe the same individual, but the same species, which is much more darker. That happens due to this melanophore pigment in them, because frog also contain these biochromes, which are the pigments which actually absorbs or reflect the light, intensity of light, right, and appears to change the color. So they also have contained that. So what happens in the sail? Imagine you have a star, you have drawn a star, and you have put a lot of black dots around the star, and from a distance the star look more black, right? So when this melanophore, the pigments are scattered, they appears to be dark. But when you don't need it, if you put all the dots concentrated in the middle, then the rest of the arms of the stars will show clear, like the color, whatever the surrounding is. And only one portion would look more darker. So when these melanophores aggregated or get concentrated in the sail, they appear darker in shade. And that also happens due to many reasons. It could be to get itself away from the predator. Sometimes the temperature, how it temperature happens, because we know that darker shades absorb more heat when the temperature fall. If it is cold, it will be little darker. But when it is warmer, it has to reflect that heat, reflect the light. So it will be lighter in color. With that, they also change in color by one. Let me give you an example. Suppose you have taken a straw, not the paper one, but if you see a plastic straw, white color, and you put some color banding around the straw, and then pour either all the wavelength, the light wave colors. I mean, maybe red, blue, green, yellow, all this. Pour any color liquid in the straw. So imagine all the color bands you have put, and when in the translucent pipe, when you pour a particular color, every color band would like visually it will be different to our eye. The frog has the same mechanism, which happens in their microtubules. So that's how when we see the frog, we see it that depending on the light, it is changing its body or the skin color with the environment. So if you go to the next slide, a research has been done on a tree frog in the Southeast Asia, and these researchers have made a terrarium which has different colors of stone, soil, dry wooden log, and some vegetation, green in color, and they have put same species, like 5-6 individual of same species, and each and every frog have been like hiding somewhere in these areas. And when after some time, when they took them out, go to the next slide, they have these different varieties at different point of time. See the variation of colors in just one species of frog. Pile, this is crazy. I mean, imagine those dark, very dark color to the lightish, I mean the whitish color it has. It's so different. But the scientists could found that this green color is predominant in them. So most of the time, these things have they have kept on happening. Almost 167 times they have done this, you know, this whole exercise, and they have found most of the time green is the most predominant color the frog has chosen. It says, it's an hypothesis. It says maybe the wavelength or the light wave of the green is more compatible to the skin pigment what the frog exists. And with this, and this also happens due to this hormonal changes as well. You know, it could be like the byproduct of certain hormones released due to, you know, physiological stress. Not only physiological stress, again the mood, or if it is getting irritated, it's want to hide, or it's got scared, disturbed. So all these things bring some hormonal changes, and according to that also these colors might reflect. So that reason we would see in the next slide that this experiment has been done on a tree frog again. So due to that, you know, continuous flash of light while taking the picture, there's this tree frog change into brown in color, and then left it just like that. And after half an hour, it again turned back to the green shade which it was. So it took almost half an hour to relax its, you know, nervous system or the hormonal disbalance which was happening. It took half an hour to get back to its normal color, which is green. And so imagine it also can, nobody touched it. It just the light frequently flickering on it or flashing on it. That also make these changes of color. How incredible that you think of it. And do you know what, while the more incredible part, if you go to the next slide, I know this has nothing to do with the color change particularly, but in some frogs, there are fluorescence in them. In one South American frog, okay, Hyla. This is also a tree frog. It's Hyla punctatus. This contains fluorescence. Imagine in a UV light, we are taking out, you know, most of the time we go out for scorpions to look for scorpions, right? And
Yeah.
imagine you get to see this frog glowing under the UV light. I mean, this is absolutely stunning and so cool. No matter which designer wear, designing clothes we are wearing, no matter how much, flashing or colorful things we are doing, I think these creatures is just outstanding. I mean, they have knocked out us in every way when it comes to color composition and everything. What do you say?
Absolutely. This particularly this last slide is mind blowing. I think if I didn't know, if someone didn't tell me, and if I had to see a frog glowing like this, I'd probably think I'm hallucinating. It was that unbelievable. It's so surreal to see a frog like this, right? You just don't imagine this could be possible. Really, really fascinating. I mean, just look at just in four examples, going from the chameleon to the octopus to the little tiny beetle to the tree frog. I mean, all of us, many of us who fall in love with nature, often the journey starts with colors, right? Whether it is colors of a beautiful bird or colors of flowers. I mean, we usually get attracted with that. And now just geeking out on it, just sort of looking at these various little aspects that are making these colors possible. And rather in this, like we spoke in this presentation, the changes in color possible, it just makes us feel like we're looking at the world again in a completely different light, right? I hope all of you here in the audience are equally fascinated just like us. And when you see changes in color in nature, I'm sure you'll wonder why and how this must be happening and what it means for the creature as well, right? Because the reasons are so very different, from moods to temperatures to camouflage and all the rest of it. It's so amazing. And just as Arpita and I were making this presentation, and we're like, it's this world of change of color, we were able to cover only the species that change rather quickly, right? But we haven't touched upon the seasonal ones, right? Like the butterfly here, the one you have in front of you, is a common evening brown. What you see on the left is the dry season morph, and on the right is the wet season morph. It's the same butterfly, the same individual who changes, the same species that changes, comes in two different colors in different seasons. And then, of course, you have the birds who have the breeding plumage, like the sunbird here in the picture. You see the purple sunbird in beautiful breeding plumage to your left, and the non-breeding, or what we call the eclipse plumage, right? The same individual who switches between colors by molting, for example, in different seasons. And why just animals, right? Plants. Plants are known to play with pigments on a regular basis, changing themselves, changing their whole look seasonally. And here, of course, we are most familiar with leaves changing colors, from the different colors you see in autumn. And in our case here in India, you see the reds and the yellows in spring. Why that happens, how that happens, is a completely different story altogether. And we just realized that, just speaking of colors and changes of colors, we can go on and on and on researching and studying about it, because it is so absolutely fascinating. So we hope that someday we'll try and do a talk on maybe the few more examples which have a completely different mechanism and completely different reasons for change in color.
Yeah, I
So yeah.
mean, Payal, sorry, and Payal, while you were talking about that, there are so many things on color changing, and I think it's not only not changing in color. I think it's a whole physics or whole science behind how the prism of light or the prism works actually. For instance, for example, the polar bear, its skin is actually black in color, but the far is hollow, and that the prism of light, because that reflects the light and the snow, that's why it looks white. I mean, now if you go to the Churchill Churchill trip, you will see the polar bear, but it looks white, but somewhere that it is black in color. So I think this whole color orientation in the animal world or in nature, of course, trees is very, very important. I mean, they show so many colors. I think that gives you a whole scenario of understanding that how things really happen in nature and how.
Absolutely. Completely agree. Yeah, I mean, I think we can just go on and on and on, but I think we should use this opportunity to stop for now,
Yes.
and maybe we can have some time if there are any questions.
Thank you both. Now, before we start the question and answer session, I would like to remind everyone that you can submit your questions via the question field in the control panel. All right, let's get to some of these questions. Now, with the frogs, how is it that you can identify what species is which? Is there a list of traits you follow because of the different variations and patterns of color that just don't help us?
Yes. Oh, that's a wonderful question. I think I need to do another webinar for that. So so when we are talking about a particular species, they show some physiological characteristic depending on their limbs to the placement of the tympanum. If they have no color, even there is no color change and stuff, all these things, the padding, the digits, the size of the digits and everything, this also depends that that this is the particular species and is just the change in color what we see in different times.
Great. So, what about hummingbirds? Are there any hummingbirds that are fluorescent like the frogs?
Flo.
I don't know of fluorescence in hummingbirds, but iridescence, yes, for sure. If you see any hummingbird for that matter, at least of the ones I know of, you see them in different angles. You see different shades of purples and greens. If you see them in good sunshine versus seeing them in shade, a brightly colored hummingbird can look totally black when it is in shade, just because the little crystals that reflect light by virtue of it, which it gets its colors, is not getting enough light. The hummingbird can look completely black because of that. So yeah, not sure about fluorescence. I don't think there's fluorescence in hummingbirds, but iridescence for sure.
Fascinating, it really is. So let's talk about the ladybug for a second. Now, were there predators like birds learn instinctively to stay away from them, or how do they learn?
Yeah, so good question, very good question. Most birds or most predators who eat or learn about insects that are impalatable, or learn that certain colors mean that the creature is impalatable, is often by mistake. So if they take the insect in, suppose they eat impalatable insect in their mouth, they'll either spit it out, or if they swallow it, they end up regurgitating, they'll vomit it out. And that one error is usually enough for them to never touch a brightly colored insect ever again.
Gotcha. So what about how humans blush? Is that anything like having the iridophores or etc. under our skin?
And no, the blush is mainly because of the rush of blood. That when we get excited, there's a rush of blood that's going onto our face, or sometimes even angry people, when you're angry, your face can get red. That's mostly because of blood rushing to the tiniest capillaries right to the uppermost.
Below the epidermis, yeah.
Great, thank you for that. So what is this bird that we're looking at right now?
Okay, Payal, may I?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so this is the Indian roller, and I think it is the most seen bird whenever you come, any of you come for the trip in India or the Nepal, Bhutan, you will get to see this bird for sure in the forest. And when they fly, you see this beautiful flashing indigo color. And trust me, Rob, this is an optical illusion. Exactly how Payal described those crystals. So they reflect this crystals reflect this blue light. Actually, if we see the feathers in that way, they have actually no colors. I mean, you won't see this bright colors. So this is an Indian roller. I had to talk about this because this is also damn interesting. Yeah, this is an Indian roller.
It really is a fascinating subject, but unfortunately, that's the last question that we're going to have time for today. So I'd like to hand it back to you for any closing comments you might have tonight.
Payal, you go first.
Okay. Yeah, as usual, thank you everyone. And it's really, really because of you that we get an opportunity to study, learn, put these things together, and then present. It's just so much fun. And I hope you all enjoy it as much as we do. And have to thank Arpita for really pulling me into all these very, very interesting webinars on the topics that she thinks of. It's amazing. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Payal, and thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in today. And please keep observing, keep going here and there. Something must be hiding in your backyard, and let us know to have email, and we will definitely get to know about if you have observed something. And for now, take care. Have a great day, and thank you so much, Rob, for being with us.
Yes,
My
thank you.
pleasure. Thank you both for taking so much time today to present for us. And I'd also like to thank everyone who tuned in today. If you're interested in information on how you can travel with NatHab, please give us a call at the number on your screen or send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are happy to help you out. Join us tomorrow for our next Daily Dose of Nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next time.